Theme music means it's time for Talk of the Bay, KSQD's local public affairs program, brought to you every weekday evening at 5. I'm your Thursday evening host, Rachel Ann Goodman, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the microphones Fred Keeley, the mayor of Santa Cruz, the first elected mayor of Santa Cruz in history. Welcome to K-Squid, Fred. Thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure, Rachel Ann.
Great to have you. Thanks for making the time. And listeners, if you have questions and you would like to call in the question, you can also text it to 831-900-5773, and we'll make sure to get your question to Fred. My first question is, what's going on with all the development in town? Many people are seeing buildings go up. They're also seeing plans for buildings everywhere from Mission Street to downtown Santa Cruz. When you got elected, you said something about passing an ordinance that would limit height of buildings to, I think it was 10 stories, but I could be wrong about that. How's that going? And is that figuring into these new plans that we're seeing come about with multi-story buildings in Santa Cruz?
Well, thank you for that. Yes, what has happened, to set a little context for this, is that the state of California, the legislature and the governor have adopted a series of bills over the last 3 or 4 years which have said to local governments largely, you need to build an awful lot more housing, and that needs to be across a range of incomes. And that's always been the case, but there have been almost no consequences for not hitting the number that is assigned by the state. And by adopting these new statutes, the legislature and the governor have essentially said this: if you don't build it, we will. Meaning, if you don't approve proposals for housing development that come through your city, we will be glad to take that away from you and simply say yes ourselves. And you will have nothing to say about it then. So based on that prompting by the state of California, Santa Cruz was given as a city the number of 4,000, roughly 4,000 new housing units over the course of the next 8 years. And so, as you might imagine, that's a very large number that would have a huge impact on Santa Cruz. And I want to tie this into a second issue, which is that we've changed governance structure in Santa Cruz. Instead of having at-large city council members, we are going to have 6 council members elected by district. So now let's put the two together. 4,000 housing units in the next 8 years, council members elected by council district. My guess is, wild guess, you're not going to hear anybody running for city council in the next 2, 4, 6, 8 years who says, I know what I want to do in my residential district. I want to load in 1,000 new housing units. That's not going to be a winning strategy. It won't happen. And so what is, I think, much more likely to happen is that 1,800 or so of those units will be built in our urban core. And Scott Newsom, who was elected in November when I was elected, Scott Newsom, the new city council member there, ran on that, saying, I want to do that in this district.
Yumby.
Because it will provide jobs, housing, employment, opportunities for recreation, for entertainment, the whole range of activities. So the city, now let me feather in the city piece. About a year ago, I think the city made a huge mistake. They knew they had to do this. So what they did was that they sent forth to environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act a proposal that said we're going to build some 15-story, 18-story, and 20-story buildings downtown as part of all of this development. Now, I don't know what anybody else heard when they were running for city council or mayor, but I did not knock on one door where somebody said, you know what the real problem is? We don't have enough 20-story buildings in Santa Cruz. Nobody said that.
What's the height of the one that's going in on Front Street right now?
So I think that is the one that's under construction, I believe, is 8.
And that seems really
Big.
high.
It seems big, and it is big compared to some things, although it's just slightly taller, not in terms of stories, but number of feet, as the Palomar. Mm-hmm. It's roughly the same size as the Palomar. But here's the deal. The city went forward on this with 15, 17, 20-story buildings and so on. And I said, in fact, I said it here in your studio when Joyce Schendeldecker and I were seeking the mayor's seat. I said, the first thing I will do at the first council meeting, first agenda item, is that I will carry an item that will cap any new building at 12 stories. We'll do 16 to 1,800 units, and 20% of all of that needs to be affordable. Now, the reason that last piece is important is that the city currently has a 20% requirement. But once you get density bonuses and all kinds of other things, allows the developer to put in the 20% affordable, they get density bonuses, which mean they get to build an awful lot more market rate housing. So when you net the thing out, it's more like 13% affordable housing. I said, let's get rid of the BS around that. If it's 20, then we want 20. And so at the first council meeting, with public participation and discussion, on a unanimous 6-0 vote, because Councilmember Bruner can't vote on that because she's employed by the Downtown Association, so she has conflict. But on a 6-0 vote, that's exactly what the council did. 12 stories, 16 to 1,800 units, 20% of all that has to be affordable. So I think we've now right-sized this.
Does that overlay the proposal that they sent about 20-story building?
Proposal's gone.
Oh, good.
That's gone. This
That's
completely, it erased it off the board. This is the new proposal being advanced through the environmental review process now.
So that's 2 stories more than the big building that looks ridiculously tall right now. So it's still taller than the one that's going in.
It is taller than the one going in. And
did you say 10 or 12?
12.
12, so it's 4 stories higher.
And it seems to me that, to go back to what did I hear on the campaign trail, so because I'm a little bit anyway of a known quantity around town, I didn't feel like I needed to really talk about myself very much. So I'd knock on a door, and somebody would come to the door, and I'd say, hello, Ms. Goodman, my name's Fred Keeley. I'd love to be your mayor. What's on your mind? Rather than, I'm Fred Keeley, love to be your mayor, let me tell you how I'm qualified. So instead, just shift it over to the voter. 90+% of the people, the first 2 things out of their mouth was homeless and affordable housing. And you'd have to step off a cliff to go to number 3. And that was a mishmash of 4 or 5 or 6 other issues. But this got mentioned by virtually everybody. So now let's combine all that. You got an electorate which wants to, at a minimum, talk a lot about it, thinks there's 2 very important issues. You've got the state taking power, land use power away, but throwing a very big number at Santa Cruz. And the question becomes, then where do you do that? And I do believe that in district elections, there's not going to be a mad rush district by district to see how much they can build in their district. I think what's very likely to happen is the direction we're in right now, which is do what smart cities do, grow up in your urban core and protect your neighborhoods as much as possible. So I think that has real purchase to it right now in the electorate in Santa Cruz. That's not to say that everybody's going to like every building that's put up. I understand that. But if we don't do it there, we'll have to do it elsewhere. This is not any longer optional. It's not like, well, the state will keep a couple of dollars from the Community Development Block Grant Fund because you didn't hit your number.
There is a town that's suing the state, I believe. I forget.
Oh, there's going to be a number of towns suing the state over this, and they're going to lose. They're going to lose on that.
Yeah. Another question about that. A friend of mine was saying, you don't need to build these giant rectangles. You can backstep them as they're getting taller.
Totally agree with that.
Leave more sun to come into, because our downtown is equally an economic engine, and if it becomes a canyon, a dark canyon like some downtowns are, if you go to some parts of the Embarcadero, you just are hemmed in by giant buildings. Not to mention some of the earthquake problems that could occur the higher you get, the more wobbly they become.
I completely agree with that. some sort of, return to Stalinist architecture is not my idea of a good time in downtown
Brutalism.
Santa Cruz.
No.
Exactly. The county building will not be our model here. So there's a right way, a Santa Cruz way. We will sort that out, just like we did after the earthquake when Marty Wormhout, with great courage and leadership, led us through 2 years of how do we recover from the earthquake. And I think the product after the earthquake is lovely and charming in Santa Cruz. And I think that's our challenge.
It's certainly
do
more
it a Santa
vibrant
Cruz way.
than it used to be. I remember when things would just shut down at 8 o'clock. So there's definitely a different feel at night. When businesses are open and people are dining outdoors and it's warm weather.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm getting texts, I don't always know who's sending them.
Sure.
They're just a phone number. So this person writes, affordable for what income bracket?
That's right. So the state divides things into basically market rate, moderate, low, very low. What I'm interested in is making sure that we hit our very low and low targets. We're going to have any trouble hitting the market rate targets. There's a market out there for people living in an urban area, especially young people. Many of them want to live in an urban environment. They like the vibrance, as you were talking about just a moment ago, of an urban environment. We're going to have any trouble hitting the number on building enough units there. It's really the low and the very low that I'm focused on. Because that is the trickiest. What basically happens is that nonprofit housing developers, and for that matter, for-profit housing developers, when they get around to doing their affordable housing component, if they put everything together they possibly can under the law, density bonuses, tax credits, all kinds of things, they're $150,000 to $250,000 per unit short of being able to make it work. And this is not my opinion. I wouldn't know anything about that independently. This is what the nonprofit housing developers in our community say is the smallest number, $150,000 to $200,000 per unit. So that is the hardest to build. And my thought on that is, and we can talk about this also in the context of homelessness, but my thought is, and I said it again here when Joy and I were here talking about the campaign, that I think what the city should do on this is after a public process this year, is get a measure to the ballot next year, which will be for the brick and mortar side of homelessness, shelter, navigation center, permanent supportive housing, and on the other side, funding for very low and low income housing, so that we can move with some alacrity and really make progress on the issue.
There seems to be a lot of grants that come in for dealing with homelessness, but they don't end up with housing. They end up with shelters or administrators, surveying
programs,
people.
Or programs.
Yeah, or things that sunset after the grant's gone.
That's right.
Doesn't give us permanent housing. So
that's right.
Maybe those grants can be focused on getting this low income housing built at the same speed we're supposed to be getting these other 4,000 built as well. I want to leave time for other topics. If there's anything, I'm sure there's more we didn't get to on this topic.
Next topic.
Talk about it all night. West Cliff Drive took a real hit during the atmospheric rivers, and lots of it fell away, and now there's a discussion about making it one way. For part of it or all of it. So I'd like to hear what you're hearing from the public, and I'm sure it's not unified about that. What's the latest discussion on the city council about this?
So on Tuesday, we had a multi-part item on West Cliff, and it would follow the normal series of things, which is we have work to do literally right now. It still needs to be put in place to shore that up on a temporary basis. Then, with that temporary basis, modeling, trying out temporarily a pilot program for partial one-way on West Cliff and where the most damage is and so on, where the road is the narrowest now. So for 2 or 3, 4 blocks on either side of that would become one way. And then the city council appropriated $700,000 from a contingency fund we have to do that work, to get the one-way and the shoring up. And what we know is, though, as soon as you push folks off of Westcliff for one-way, they're going to go someplace. And we know what those probably are, Oxford Street and a number of others that are going to be right in the target of where that traffic goes. So one of the things the public asked for, and I think is very realistic, is don't just put up a sign. Don't just put something small up that says detour this way. You need to harden this up a bit so that you really can't go down our residential street or whatever it might be, or you're strongly discouraged anyway. So those kinds of very practical way to test this out without burdening these other streets, that's going to be underway as well. I suspect that when all is said and done on this, I would not be surprised if some portion of Westcliff is permanently one way, but that's getting way ahead of the game.
Well, nature's going to have its say about all of this, right?
Nature has its say, and here's the deal as I see it is, I remember back when in the 82, 83 storms and some of the storms in the early 90s, it would happen, and somebody, meteorologists would be on radio or TV, and they'd say, this is a 100-year storm, or this is a 200-year storm. Now, that doesn't mean it only happens once every 100 years. You could have back-to-back 100-year storms, but this is the kind of thing that comes once in 100 years. It's a
rare.
Really, really big deal. Right. That's not how they talk anymore. They don't say that anymore. They say now, this is the new normal. Get used to it. Longer droughts, wetter wets, and with more force behind it. Well, the Pacific Ocean has plenty of force on its own. Didn't need to be encouraged, but it's being encouraged. And so now it's even stronger storm surge. We could have those back to back. Yeah. That is going to become more what we're regularly dealing with. So the sort of we'll put it back the way it was is a recipe for you're going to have this. You're going to be spending $20 million every other year or something on this thing. So get it right once, what we're going to do with this, because it's a new world we're in, new environmental world we're in.
And most of the houses along there are multi-million dollar homes, which I always wondered what their insurance policy looks like.
Yeah, right.
They probably aren't saying, but I'm really curious because, at some point, those are not going to be defensible anymore. Like at Rio Del Mar Beach, they're right on the sand. And, it feels like such a tragedy when these houses are ruined. And it's sad because they're beautiful. But at the same time, what did you think was going to happen?
Exactly.
You're right on the level with the ocean, except maybe 2 steps above, And
here's my issue with that. Actually, the Vice President of the United States called me when she and I have known each other a bit here and there. I don't want to pretend I have some close relationship. I don't. But we know each other a bit. And she called before the president came out. She said, we got the president coming out in California, and you want to do anything on that? And, tell me more about your damage and so on. And I said, Madam Vice President, I can't thank you enough for calling. Please don't send the president here. I said, our damage is not sympathetic looking damage. The Capitola Wharf is a way better sympathetic. The floods in Pajaro and Watsonville, those are much more sympathetic. I said, I don't need a photo op today. I need a check tomorrow. Yeah. That's what I need.
And it's funny because President Biden actually said, it didn't look that bad, but now that I'm on the ground, I actually see that it's pretty horrible. He was at Seacliff State Beach.
So here's the other piece of that. You mentioned the multi-million-dollar homes, and that's exactly right. For me, that's, look, that's private property, and I don't wish them ill and so on, and good for them that they can make that happen. That's fine. That's not my primary concern. My primary concern is that Westcliff is a multi-use recreational throughway from one state park at one end all the way down to the boardwalk on the other end for bicyclists, skaters, you name it, they're
Surfers.
On there. Everybody's on Westcliff. And it draws literally millions of visitors every year from outside for a reason those same very fortunate people built their homes there.
You want to look at the ocean. Sometimes that's
So
you just want
everybody
to
else
sit on
wants
a
to do it.
bench, right?
And so to me, this is primarily about preserving, protecting, and preserving well into the future this free, tremendous environmental experience, recreational experience for millions of people every year. That's what I'm trying to save, is that.
That's great. Somebody made a parallel between that and Highway 1 in Big Sur. It's like one of the most expensive pieces of road to keep open. And we may have something like that ourselves and have to make decisions about what kind of access. Maybe you have to walk there for a block away. Who knows? Would this one-way new traffic pattern preclude all those parking spaces that are there now?
Don't know. That level of detail
That's a big deal.
is down the pike here
Okay,
a bit.
we
It
won't
might
ask
only
her.
be a couple of months or so before knowing that answer.
We'll have you back.
Okay, that sounds good.
You're listening to Talk of the Bay. I'm Rachel Goodman. I'm talking with Fred Keeley, the mayor of Santa Cruz, about various things. And we're going to move over to a recent revelation that I believe the journalism outlet Lookout Santa Cruz uncovered, where it was found that the mayors of 4 of the cities in Santa Cruz County were meeting without noticing their meetings, which is a Brown Act violation. You came along after this was happening. Were you surprised to learn this?
I was two things. First, rather than being surprised, which was my second feeling about it, I was mad. And I'll tell you why. It's not like this thing just came into existence yesterday or 2 months ago. It's been in existence for decades, and it's in the state law. It's not something made up by Santa Cruz. It's called the Mayor Selection Committee. And what they do is the mayors get together, and there are certain nominations for various public bodies. And their existence is, or the purpose to exist, is to agree on forwarding names, sometimes to the speaker, sometimes the governor, sometimes President Pro Tem of the Senate, sometimes this, sometimes that. So it's to advance names. That's why it's called select. We are selecting people that will move their names forward. So what happens is that county council, which is to say the lawyers for the county, opined after 25 years of having a different view that it wasn't covered by the Brown Act, said, we believe it's covered by the Brown Act. Now, what I want to say about that is no facts changed, no law changed, no regulation changed, county council changed their opinion. Well, that's okay, but I'm not going to another one of those meetings. So I've been to 2 since I've been mayor. I've told them I'm not going to any more meetings until you get a written opinion from county council about this. And based on the strength or weakness of that opinion, I may ask for an attorney general opinion on it. I hope it is covered by the Brown Act. Makes all the sense in the world to me. But I was more than a little put off by this change in position that is still an oral opinion, not a written opinion. And I think any public body, makes all sense. You read the Brown Act; it's not exactly vague on
they
who's
want you to have
included
transparent,
in that.
noticed meetings. That's
absolutely.
The
is
reason.
that too much to ask?
It's
No.
about transparency, and so
absolutely.
And I have a feeling most of the public would not attend, but if they wanted to, they should be able to know
exactly
where it's happening. I actually went to. It wasn't that meeting, but I went to another meeting once. It was the mayors of all of Monterey County, and I don't know. I heard it was like a special meeting in the back room. We got to look into that too.
Well, on that, by the way, one of the criticisms was that this mayor's select committee was meeting in private restaurants and
literally back rooms.
Literally,
maybe
back
not
rooms.
smoke filled.
Now, not me. The 2 meetings I've attended, one in early February, one in late February, were both Zoom calls, and but. I mean, that's hardly better if you're not publishing that and letting people know about
people
it.
want to, if they want to go, they should be able to go.
I thought it was outrageous.
All right. Well, we have a little bit more time, so let's take the last 4 or 5 minutes to cover anything else we missed. No, sorry. We'll have you back. This is only your 3rd month as mayor, so what are some of the highlights and lowlights so far? You chose this job It's not always the easiest job. It's also the first time it's been defined as an elected position. So how is that going?
Several things. One, I was really happy that at that first meeting that we had, first agenda item, that we reimagined what our downtown could look like. We needed to wipe that off the blackboard and put a reasonable proposal on the table that the community can now wrestle around with, but because that was a dead on arrival. In fact, it was dead before it could arrive.
So that was a big victory
bad idea.
right out of the gate.
Enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Also, we made a change the week thereafter where, because we're going to districts, I started to ran an ordinance amendment and some other actions to operationalize this, but heretofore, all the planning commissioners were appointed at large by at-large council members. And my thought is, in what I call the power commissions, planning, public works, water, parks, downtown, those commissions, I think it's a good idea for council members to have their own appointees to that, to help them build their own team. And the reason for that is because they get paid almost nothing, city council members, almost nothing. They have no staff that work directly for them, and now they don't have offices. I have an office still in City Hall, but all the other council offices went away in January. And I offered them, I said, I'll be glad to expend some political capital on your behalf if you want to still have an office in City Hall. And they said, nah, hardly ever here anyway. And, it doesn't matter. I'll tell you, what I told them is, I said, you do what you want to do on that, but here's my view. Did you ever go to Leon Panetta's office when he was chief of staff to the President of the United States? People would say no. I'd say, okay, here's the deal. It's about half the size of my office in City Hall, which is a small office, about half that size. But it had two great advantages to it. Number one was it had a door you could walk in, but more importantly, the other door went into the Oval Office. It's not how big is your office, it's where the hell is it? And my colleague said, that's okay. I hardly ever come to City Hall. Well, okay. You do that at your peril. I believe in location when it comes to offices.
And it goes back to the issue of accessibility and being able to talk to your representative if you want to, which is a nice thing to be able to do. Well, I think it's time to wish you luck in the next phase of your mayorship. And please do come back for another visit so you can keep us apprised of what's happening in the city of Santa Cruz.
Well, you always make me feel so welcome, and I also want to congratulate you on your capital campaign. Way to go.
Thank you.
Knocked it out of the park. I'm so proud of you.
We're really happy, and we have to thank
are.
our listeners profusely for making it happen for us, because that was a big deal.
Great.
Fred Keeley, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take good care. This is KSQD Santa Cruz, 90.7 FM. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. In just a moment, we'll be talking to some folks that are part of the Watsonville Film Festival. But first, we will tell you about an upcoming show. Stay tuned.